Hi, so this is a video on doing the tables and the graphs from what we were working on with the kinetic energy and the pendulum data. So I'm going to actually do this from beginning to end so you can see step by step on how you should do it. If you are having trouble, just redo the table and redo the graph while you watch this video so that way you don't get any errors or you're not getting any mistakes. So first thing I'm gonna do is do the actual graph. So here I'm gonna have, it's actually not height, but I'm gonna have length, then I'm gonna have mass, and then amplitude. And then of course I'm gonna have periods. So for length, remember on one of the tables, if you're testing amplitude, your length and your mass should be the same. So in this case, my length and my mass are the same and my amplitude is actually changing. And of course, I'm just making up these data. You will insert the data that you have. And in this case, so this is my table. After you write it down, make it nice, add a border so it's presentable. Alright, so that's my first table, and you probably want to add a heading. So this is, I'll name this table amplitude testing. And again, you want to label things because you want to know exactly what does this table mean. That way anybody can look at this table and see that what you're testing here is the amplitude, but also they can just read the heading, which will tell them exactly what's being tested. So this is amplitude testing, and now I'm just going to copy this table, and on this one I'm going to now do mass testing. Now your mass testing, that means that your mass should be changing, so I'm going to actually change this to 40 and to 60, and that means your amplitude should be the same. And let me change these periods so it can look differently. And now my last one will be my length test. And that means that my length should actually be different for each of them, and my mass should be the same. And my amplitude will be the same as well, so I'm going to leave that how it is, and I'm going to change the number of periods. So these are my three tables. I can see that this is my amplitude testing, and I can see that by the title, and I could also see that because the amplitude is changing and I'm leaving the factor of mass and length the same. Same thing with mass testing. You see the mass is changing for each trial and the length and the amplitude are the same. Also, I title it mass testing so it's easier to see. Now we want to do the graph. Now to do the graph with your key, the way that you can highlight multiple columns, if you highlight one by dragging your mouse, so your periods, I want to graph my periods and my amplitude. if you hold the control key, it will let you highlight multiple columns. So for instance, if I wanted to highlight periods and mass, I can do that by dragging the mouse, by holding the mouse and dragging it, holding the control key, and then dragging mass as well. It will let you highlight more than one column. So let's go back to here. I want to graph periods and I want to graph amplitude. So if you go there and then you go to insert, graph, you see that the first graph is my periods with my amplitude. And I know this because these numbers right here are my periods, and these numbers on the x-axis are my amplitude. And you can prove that because on here it says at 125 amplitude my periods was 140. This is 125 amplitude and my period is 140. So really you should only have one line, and this is going to be easier to see. I know before I said to have 3 lines in one graph, but I think it'll be best just to have one line, and I'm going to show you why in a little bit after we're done with each graph. So when you do the graph, make sure you add your axis. Your axis is going to be here, and then make sure you title them. So in this example, the x-axis is going to be amplitude, and your y-axis is going to be periods. And then make sure you title your graph. I'm going to title this one amplitude versus periods. And that's it for this one. So you can see with this graph that my amplitude, as my amplitude increases, my periods is increasing as well. And this goes along with this table. It's saying at 105 it should be 110 periods, and that's what the table is saying as well. But what this graph helps identify is the relationship between amplitude and period. As amplitude is increasing, my periods are increasing. And now let's do it for the next one. So again, I'm going to drag periods because that's my outcome. I'm going to hold control key, and now I'm going to highlight my mass because that's what's being tested. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to insert, go to my scatter line option, and here is my second graph. Again, make sure you label your axis. So this time I'm gonna label this mass, and then I'm gonna label this my periods, and I'm gonna title this graph mass versus periods. And same thing right here, it says when the mass is 60, my period is 100 and about 180, close to 180, and the table says 60. Oh, it's actually 175. That's why I wasn't touching 180. When my mass is 40, my period is 140, and you can see that on the table. When the mass is 40, period is 140. So the graph is showing the same thing as a table. However, this graph is showing the relationship between mass and periods, that as my mass is increasing, my periods are increasing. And then let's do the last one with length testing. So again, I'm going to hold the mouse and drag it to the end of the column, and then I'm going to hold the control key and I'm going to highlight the length column, and then I'm going to go to insert, go to my scatter line option, and then I'm going to do the same thing that I did with, and actually let me drag it on this side so I could have all my graph at the same place. And again, you could have fun with this and customize it as you want. You could put a color background. You can change the color of the line to make it presentable. Remember to label your axis. So my x-axis is length, and then my y-axis is periods, and I'm going to title this length versus periods. Of course, name yours differently. So this one is saying that at 20 it is about 160, and let's see, 20, 165, so close enough. Again, the importance of these graphs, and this is why I wanted you guys to do graph, is because you can easily see the relationship between what we're testing to the outcome. For instance, like I mentioned before, over here you can see that as amplitude is increasing, periods are increasing. So amplitude has a direct effect with how many periods there are depending on the amount of amplitude that you tested. Same thing with the mass versus period, the mass graph. As mass increases, the amount of periods increases. So as you increase the mass for each trial, you are going to see an increase of periods. Same thing with the length. As length increase, the periods increase. Now, again, these data are made up. So I'm making up this data. Maybe yours says something differently. But this is the power of using graphs, because they can easily and quickly give you a relationship or tell you what is happening with your data. Once you have these graphs, you can easily go to a Word document. You could go to a Word document and you can do the Control C and then Control V into your report, and you could easily paste your graphs. But create them on Excel before you put them into Word. I know Word gives you an option to create a graph. Do not use Word. Use Excel and then paste it into Word. Hope that helps. If you guys have any other questions, make sure you post it on Emoto.